Welcome to this lesson to improve your American English conversation. Before we move on to the conversation, here are 105 essential conversation words and phrases for beginners, with simple explanations and examples. 1. Visa, official permission to enter a country. Example, you need a visa to visit the USA. 2. Non-immigrant visa, for temporary stays, tourism, study. Example, she got a non-immigrant visa for her vacation. 3. Immigrant visa, for moving permanently. Example, he applied for an immigrant visa to live in the U.S. 4. Green card form I-551, proof of U.S. permanent residency. Example, show your green card at the border. 5. Embassy consulate, U.S. government offices abroad issuing visas. Example, apply for your visa at the U.S. Embassy. 6. Apply application, to formally ask for something, e.g., a visa. Example, you must apply online first. 7. Port of entry, place you arrive in the U.S. airport, border. Example, present your documents at the port of entry. 8. CBP officer, Customs and Border Protection officer who checks you at entry. Example, the CBP officer asked about my trip. 9. Admission, allowed to enter the country. Example, the CBP officer decides your admission. 10. I-94 form I-94, record of legal entry and stay length. Example, check your I-94 online for your stay date. 11. Visitor B1 B2 visa, for business B1 or tourism visiting B2. Example, I need a B2 visa to see my family. 12. Tourism, traveling for vacation. Example, her trip is for tourism. 13. Business trip, travel for work reasons. Example, he's on a business trip. 14. Student visa F1 M1, for studying F1 academic, M1 vocational. Example, she has an F1 visa for university. 15. Work visa HLO, for temporary jobs H1B, L1, O1. Example, his company sponsored his H1B visa. 16. Exchange visitor J visa, for cultural educational exchange programs. Example, au pairs often come on J visas. 17. Fiancé visa K1, to enter the U.S. to marry a citizen. Example, they applied for a K1 visa. 18. Permanent resident, someone with a green card, not a citizen. Example, permanent residents can live and work in the U.S. 19. Passport, official travel document from your country. Example, you need a valid passport. 20. Documents paperwork, official papers needed. Example, make sure you have the correct documents. 21. Interview, meeting with an official to ask questions. Example, the visa interview was short. 22. Fee, money you pay. Example, the visa application fee is $185. 23. Valid validity, officially acceptable, how long it's acceptable. Example, is your passport still valid? The visa's validity is 10 years. 24. Expire, to no longer be valid. Example, my visa expires next year. 25. Deny denial, to say no, refusal. Example, they might deny your application. The denial was under Section 214B. 26. Reason, the cause or explanation. Example, what was the reason for the denial? 27. Proof, evidence showing something is true. Example, show proof of your job back home. 28. Ties, binding ties, connections to your home country, job, family, house. Example, you need strong ties to return home. 29. Purpose, the reason for something. Example, What is the purpose of your trip? 30. Stay, to remain in a place. Example, how long will your stay be? 31. Return, to go back. Example, you must return home after your studies. 32. Temporary, for a limited time, not permanent. Example, a temporary work visa. 33. Permanent, lasting forever. Example, permanent residency. 34. Rules, regulations, policy, official instructions you must follow. Example, know the visa rules. Immigration policy is complex. 35. Process, procedure, the steps to do something. Example, the visa application process takes time. 36. Requirement, something you must have or do. Example, a passport is a requirement. 37. Eligible, eligibility, having the right to get something. Example, are you eligible for the visa waiver program? 38. Ineligible, ineligibility, not having the right. Example, a criminal record might make you ineligible. 39. Exception, a case where a rule doesn't apply. Example, Canadians are an exception, they often don't need a visa. 40. Waiver, official permission not to follow a rule. Example, the Visa Waiver Program VWP. 41. ESTA, online authorization for VWP travelers. Example, get ESTA approval before flying. 42. Authorization, official permission. Example, travel authorization is required. 43. Reciprocity, when countries give similar treatment. Example, visa fees are based on reciprocity. 44. Status, your legal category, e.g., visitor, student. Example, what is your immigration status? 45. Change status, to switch from one immigration category to another. Example, it's hard to change status from M1 to F1. 46. Overstay, to stay longer than allowed. Example, overstaying your visa is illegal. 47. File, submit, to send an official form or application. Example, file your application early. 48. Approve, approval, to say yes, acceptance. Example, did they approve your visa? We got approval. 49. Revoke, revocation, to cancel or take back. Example, the government can revoke your visa. 50. Support yourself, to pay for your own costs. Example, you must support yourself during your stay. 51. Financial situation, how much money you have earned. Example, they check your financial situation. 52. Criminal record, official history of crimes. Example, a clean criminal record is important. 53. Profile, profiling, making judgments based on group characteristics. Example, quick decisions can lead to profiling. 54. Nationality, your country of citizenship. Example, your nationality affects visa rules. 55. Dual national, citizen of two countries. Example, dual nationals might have different rules. 56. Sanctions, official penalties against a country. Example, the U.S. imposed visa sanctions. 57. Blanket ban, a ban affecting everyone in a group. Example, a blanket ban on visas from a country. 58. Humanitarian, concerned with human welfare. Example, TNU visas are humanitarian visas. 59. Victim, someone harmed by a crime. Example, victims of trafficking may get a T visa. 60. Sponsor, someone who supports an application, often financially. Example, a relative can sponsor an immigrant. 61. dependent, a spouse or child. Example, bring your dependents on an F2 visa. 62, accredited, officially recognized, approved. Example, study at an accredited school for an F1 visa. 63, full-time, doing something for the whole usual working studying time. Example, full-time students need an F1 visa. 64, seasonal, happening only during a particular season. Example, seasonal workers use H-2B visas. 65, border, the line between two countries. Example, cross the U.S. border at a port of entry. 66, land border, border crossing by road train. Example, rules differ for land border crossings. 67, carrier airline cruise line, company transporting people. Example, travel on an approved carrier with ESTA. 68, machine-readable passport, passport with data that computers can read. Example, you need a machine-readable passport. 69, return ticket, ticket proving you plan to leave. Example, show your return ticket. 70, application fee, money paid to apply. Example, pay the application fee online. 71, issuance fee, money paid if the visa is approved. Example, some countries have an issuance fee. 72, non-refundable, money you cannot get back. Example, the fee is non-refundable, even if denied. 73, source, where information comes from. Example, according to our source, the rule is. 74, material, important, significant. Example, provide material proof of your ties. 75, assets, things you own of value: house, car, savings. Example, owning property shows financial assets. 76, unemployed, without a job. Example, being unemployed can make getting a visa harder. 77, presumption, a belief something is true unless proven otherwise. Example, there's a presumption you want to stay. 78, overcome, to succeed in dealing with a problem. Example, you must overcome the presumption of immigrant intent. 79, burden, responsibility or duty. Example, the burden is on you to prove you'll return. 80, convince, to make someone believe something. Example, convince the officer you'll leave. 81, genuinely, truly, really. Example, you must genuinely intend to leave. 82, limited, restricted, not unlimited. Example, plan a limited stay. 83, crucial, very important. Example, this is a crucial point. 84, nuance, a subtle difference in meaning. Example, understand the legal nuance. 85, hurdle, a difficulty or obstacle. Example, the interview is a big hurdle. 86, compelling, strong and convincing. Example, you need a compelling reason to visit. 87, adjudicate, to make an official judgment decision. Example, officers adjudicate visas. 88, metrics, measurements used to judge performance. Example, speed metrics affect officer decisions. 89, subjectivity, influenced by personal feelings. Example, quick decisions involve subjectivity. 90, complex, complicated, not simple. Example, visa rules are complex. 91, landscape, the overall situation. Example, the immigration landscape changes. 92, takeaway, the key lesson or message. Example, the main takeaway is to be prepared. 93, ponder, to think about carefully. Example, it makes you ponder the system. 94. Grapple with, to try to understand, deal with something difficult. Example, grapple with new vocabulary. 95. Tricky, difficult, needing care. Example, some legal terms are tricky. 96. Default, the standard situation if nothing else applies. Example, the default is needing a visa. 97. Vary, to be different. Example, rules vary depending on nationality. 98. Restricted, limited access, not open to all. Example, entry to some islands is restricted. 99. Mandate, to officially order. Example, the secretary mandated social media checks. 100. Scrutiny, close and critical examination. Example, social media faces scrutiny. 101. Waiver, honko waiver, special permission to enter despite inadmissibility. Example, a waiver is rare. 102. Digital, electronic, computerized. Example, they are testing digital visas. 103. Modernize, to make modern or up to date. Example, they aim to modernize the system. 104. Freely associated states, Marshall Islands, Micronesia, Palau special entry rights. Example, citizens of freely associated states can enter freely. 105. Outlying islands, remote islands Midway, Baker Island. Example, access to outlying islands needs special permits.
Hi, I'm Linda.
And I'm Thomas.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our goal here is, well, pretty simple. We take complex information, pull out the key insights, and help you get informed fast. Today, we're tackling something huge, something that impacts millions globally. U.S. visa policy and procedures.
That's right. We've got source material that really digs into the official rules, the processes, and our mission today is to, clarify the basics.
Yeah.
We'll look at who actually needs a visa, the different kinds, who might get a pass, and the general journey of applying and actually getting into the United States.
Yeah.
All based strictly on the details in our source.
And, for many of you listening, especially if English is maybe your second language or you're working on improving it, this deep dive is also a chance to grapple with some specific words and legal phrases. Travel, immigration, it's got its own language.
It really does.
So we'll try our best to break down some of those trickier terms as we go, helping you understand both the policy and the language.
Exactly. Think of it like a 2-for-1 deep dive.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Where do we even start? What's the absolute baseline, the fundamental rule from our source? If you're not a U.S. citizen and you want to come here.
Okay, the most basic rule is this. Individuals who are not U.S. citizens, and the legal term used here is often aliens generally must get a visa.
Right.
And you get this visa from a U.S. diplomatic mission. So think U.S. embassy or consulate, usually in your home country.
Okay, so aliens is just the official term for non-citizens in this context. Nothing sci-fi about it.
Right. Just legal terminology.
And this rule, needing a visa, it applies pretty much everywhere in the U.S.
It does. Generally, we're talking all 50 states, D.C., Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands. Now, the source does mention some extra waivers, specifically for Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands. And importantly, American Samoa. Totally separate rules.
Okay, so that's a key detail right there. American Samoa is its own thing.
Completely its own thing for entry. But yeah, the starting point is usually visa needed from an embassy or consulate.
You said generally need a visa. So there are exceptions we'll get into, but the default is non-citizen, probably need a visa. And our source points to two main types, two big categories. What are they?
The two big umbrellas are the non-immigrant visa and the immigrant visa.
Okay.
The non-immigrant one, that's for temporary stays.
Yeah.
Tourism, business trips, seeing family, studying, temporary work, even just passing through what they call transit.
Temporary. That's the key word for non-immigrant. And the other one, immigrant visa.
That's for people who intend to live in the U.S. permanently.
Oh.
The source explains that when you enter on an immigrant visa, that visa itself acts as temporary proof of your permanent resident status for up to a year.
Okay.
And during that time, the government gets the actual green card, the permanent resident card, processed and sent out.
So non-immigrant, temporary visit, immigrant, moving here permanently seems clear enough. But here's a really crucial point from the source, something easily misunderstood. And important for English learners getting the legal nuances right, what does a visa actually let you do?
This is absolutely critical. The source is super clear on this. A U.S. visa is not a guarantee of entry. It's defined as preliminary permission.
Preliminary permission.
It gives you the right to travel to a U.S. port of entry, an airport, seaport, land border, and then there you formally seek admission.
Like you're asking permission to come in at the border.
Precisely. And the final call, that's made by a U.S. Customs and Border Protection officer, a CBP officer, right there at the port of entry. They decide if you get in or not.
Wow. Okay, so the visa gets you to the door, basically, but the CBP officer holds the key.
That's a good way to put it. The visa lets you travel and ask. The officer decides entry.
That distinction is huge. So once a non-immigrant is let in, how is that recorded? What's the document that shows they're here legally and for how long?
For non-immigrants, CBP records their admission details electronically. This info is tied to something called Form I-94. Right. Or Form I-94W if you came in under the visa waiver program. This I-94 record, that's the official proof you were admitted legally. It states your statuses like visitor, student, and crucially, how long you're allowed to stay. Super important piece of information for any temporary visitor.
Okay, so that I-94 record is key. Now, let's talk documents. You've got your visa, or maybe you're exempt. You arrive at the port of entry. What do you actually need to show? The source says it varies a bit, right? Air and sea versus land borders from the Americas.
Yeah, the source lists quite a few. For air or sea arrivals from further away, or land sea from the Americas, the usual suspects are there. A valid U.S. passport, if you're a citizen, obviously. Or a foreign passport with your U.S. visa in it, unless you're exempt, if you're a U.S. permanent resident. You need your green card, officially Form I-551.
Right, the I-551. Green card. The list in the source also mentions other U.S. travel docs for people with specific statuses already, like area entry permit or advance parole. Those sound like documents for people living here who travel.
Exactly. They allow certain residents or people with pending applications to leave and come back. The list gets specific for land sea arrivals from Canada or Mexico, too. It adds options like trusted traveler cards, Nexus, Sentry, Fast, global entry for U.S. and Canadian citizens.
Okay.
And enhanced driver's licenses from certain states or provinces, or even specific documents for kids under 16, like birth certificates, under specific rules.
And what about Mexico specifically?
The source mentions the border crossing card, often called a laser visa. It's a specific card for many Mexican nationals used for entry by land or certain boat trips. It functions as both a visa and an ID card.
Got it. And there were some special cases for children born abroad.
Yes, very specific conditions for children born outside the U.S., to permanent resident mothers returning soon after birth, or to parents who just received immigrant visas. It really shows how detailed the document rules are. Yeah. Depends entirely on who you are, where you're coming from, and how you're traveling.
Definitely highlights the need to have the exact right paperwork. Okay, let's shift back to those non-immigrant visas for temporary stays. The source says there are like 185 types. That sounds insane.
Yeah, 185. We are definitely not covering all of those today.
Oh, okay.
Well, let's focus on the big ones. The source highlights. Probably the most common is the B1, B2 visa.
Ah, the B visa. The classic visitor for business or pleasure.
That's the one. Sometimes issued combined as B1, B2. Sometimes separate B1 for business or B2 for tourism or visiting family. And an interesting note from the source, B visa holders can generally take short courses, as long as they aren't for credit towards a degree.
Okay, so a quick language class might be okay, but not enrolling in university.
Right.
Now, getting a B visa, here's the tricky part, the big hurdle the source talks about. You have to overcome a legal presumption. What on earth does that mean, and why is it so central?
This is probably the most critical concept for B visa applicants. U.S. immigration law starts with an assumption, a presumption, that every person applying for a non-immigrant visa actually intends to stay permanently. They assume you want to immigrate.
Whoa, so the law assumes you're planning to stay, and the burden is on you to prove you're not.
Exactly. To overcome that presumption, you have to convince the consular officer doing your interview that you genuinely intend to leave the U.S. after your temporary visit.
How do you even do that? What does the source say you need to show?
3 main things, according to the source. 1, a specific purpose for your trip. Why are you going? 2, a plan for a specific limited stay. How long? When you come back? And 3, This is the big one. You need a residence outside the U.S. with binding ties, strong connections that will ensure you return home.
Binding ties. Okay, that sounds important, but a bit vague. In plain English, what does it mean? What kind of ties are they looking for? Or maybe, what does the source say might indicate a lack of ties?
Right, so binding ties basically means strong connections to your home country. Reasons you have to go back? The source gives examples of things that consular officers might see as weaker ties. Things like financial insecurity, maybe a lower income, having an informal job, or being unemployed, or being young, single, with no kids. It's about demonstrating you have a stable life and commitments to return to.
Okay, that makes it a bit clearer. It's about showing you have roots back home. Now, the interview itself, the source gives some really interesting, maybe even startling details here. B visas are adjudicated is the official word in interviews that often last just 60 to 90 seconds.
60 to 90 seconds?
Yeah.
To decide if you've overcome that massive legal presumption.
Wow.
And because it's so fast, the source notes that consular officers, the adjudicators, often have to profile applicants.
Profiling, meaning they make quick judgments based on demographics or general characteristics.
Pretty much. Assessing people quickly based on common patterns rather than digging deep into every individual case. The source points out that certain groups like young, single, unemployed adults might find it tougher unless they have a really clear, compelling reason for the trip and strong evidence of ties presented very quickly.
And here's the kicker from the source. These officers are evaluated on their speed, not necessarily the quality of their decisions.
That's what the source indicates. Performance metrics are often based on how many applications they process per hour, not on whether their approvals or denials were ultimately correct.
Speed over accuracy, that's quite something. It really highlights the pressure and, well, the potential subjectivity baked into that very short interview. Okay, quickly on fees and how long these visas last.
Sure, there's an application fee.
Yeah.
For B visas and many others, it's around 185 USD, maybe $205 for some work visas, potentially higher for others. Crucially, this fee is non-refundable. Pay it whether you get the visa or not.
Ouch.
And if you're approved, some countries also have an extra issuance fee. This is based on reciprocity.
Reciprocity, meaning what they charge Americans for a similar visa.
Exactly. Tit for tat on fees. And the visa validity. How long it lasts, that varies wildly. The source has examples could be 10 years for citizens of many countries, but much shorter for others. Depends entirely on your nationality and the agreements in place.
Okay, and a couple of specific B visa notes the source mentions.
Yeah, two quick ones. Chinese passport holders with those 10-year B visas, they need to enroll in something called EVUS, the electronic visa update system online before they travel. It's an extra step.
EVUS, got it.
And as of early 2020, the source says B visas generally aren't issued if the main reason for the trip seems to be giving birth in the U.S. to gain citizenship for the child. Medical treatment is different, but you have to show proof of arrangements and ability to pay.
Very specific policy points there. Okay, moving beyond visitor visas. The source touches on other common non-immigrant types, especially for students, exchange visitors, and workers.
Right. Student visas are a big category, primarily F&M visas.
F&M, what's the difference?
F visas are for academic study at accredited institutions, schools that meet official standards. F1 is the main student visa for full-time academic programs. F2 is for their spouse and kids. There's also an F3 for students who live in Mexico or Canada and commute across the border to study. Their status is tracked in a database called CIVIS.
CIVIS, okay. And M visas?
M visas are for vocational or technical schools. Think trade schools, non-academic training. M1 is the student, M2 for dependents. Key point from the source here. M1 students generally cannot work, and importantly, they cannot change their status to an F1 academic student while in the U.S.
Oh, interesting. So you can't switch from vocational to academic easily. Good to know. What about J visas, exchange visitors?
J visas cover a huge range of work and study-based exchange programs funded under the Fulbright-Hays Act. The source lists tons of categories, or pair someone providing childcare for a host family, usually.
Yeah.
Students, professors, researchers, trainees, short-term scholars. Lots of different exchange purposes. J2 is for their spouse and dependents. The source also mentions some pilot programs for specific countries like Australia, Ireland, New Zealand, South Korea.
So J visas are really diverse, but focused on temporary exchange. Okay, the source lists several other non-immigrant visas. We don't need a deep dive on all 185, but maybe just flag a few more common ones mentioned.
Sure. H visas are for temporary workers. H-1B is probably the most well-known for specialty occupations.
Specialty occupation meaning?
Jobs that typically require at least a bachelor's degree or equivalent in a specific field. Think IT, engineering, science, etc. Then there's H-2A for temporary agricultural workers, H-2B for temporary non-agricultural workers like seasonal hospitality, and H-3 for trainees. H-4 is for the family members.
Okay, H for workers. What else?
L visas. These are for intra-company transferees, people working for a multinational company who are transferring to a U.S. branch. They need to be executive, managers, or have specialized knowledge specific to that company. L2 for their families.
L for intracompany. Makes sense.
O visas. These are for individuals with extraordinary ability.
Extraordinary ability, like really top-tier people.
Yeah, think top scientists, artists, athletes, business leaders, people with major achievements in film or TV, being recognized at the very top of your field. O2 is for essential support personnel for O1 visa holders, and O3 for family.
Okay, O for outstanding maybe, and K visas.
K visas are specifically for fiancé and spouses of U.S. citizens. The K1 is for a fiancé coming to marry a U.S. citizen. Big condition.
Yeah.
They must marry within 90 days of entering the U.S. and then apply to adjust status.
Adjust status means applying for the green card while already in the U.S.
Exactly. K2 is for the fiancé's children. K3, K4 are for spouses and their children already married but processing things. The source notes same-sex partners are recognized for these visas too.
Okay, K for couples.
Yeah.
And T and U visas. Those sound different.
They are. Very specific humanitarian categories. T visas are for victims of severe forms of human trafficking. U visas are for victims of certain serious crimes who have suffered substantial harm and are willing to help law enforcement investigate or prosecute the crime.
Prosecute meaning help bring the criminals to justice.
Right. Both T and U visas offer a pathway to permanent residence, a green card eventually. And there are related visas, T2 through T5, U2 through U5, for certain family members of the principal T or U visa holder.
That list really covers a huge spectrum of reasons for temporary stays. Now, the flip side, who doesn't need a visa? The biggest program the source talks about is the Visa Waiver Program, VWP.
Right. The VWP is huge. It allows citizens of specific countries, the source lists them, includes most of the EU, UK, Japan, Australia, South Korea, others to come to the US for tourism or business for up to 90 days without getting a visa beforehand.
But it's not automatic, right? You need something called ESTA.
Exactly. You can't just show up. You have to apply online for authorization through ESTA, the electronic system for travel authorization. The source mentions the cost. $4 to apply, another $17 if approved, so $21 total.
Okay.
An approved ESTA is usually good for 2 years or until your passport expires for multiple trips. But the advice is apply at least 72 hours before you fly.
And you have to travel on an approved airline or cruise line, a participating commercial carrier. What about who's not eligible for VWP, even if they're from a VWP country? The source mentions some important restrictions.
Yes, significant ineligibility rules. For example, if you've traveled to or if you're a dual national of certain countries, Iran, Iraq, Libya, North Korea, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, Yemen since March 2011, or Cuba since January 2021, you generally can't use the VWP. You'd need a regular visa.
Dual national citizen of 2 countries. So having a second passport from one of those listed countries could disqualify you from VWP.
Generally, yes. Although the source mentions this ineligibility can sometimes be waived, set aside if your travel to those places was for specific official reasons, like diplomatic work, military service, humanitarian aid, journalism, or certain business activities.
Okay, so waivers are possible, but probably not common. And for countries to even be in the VWP,
They have to meet strict criteria, like having very low B visa refusal rates, less than 3% usually. And they must offer visa-free travel to U.S. citizens, in return, that reciprocity idea again. The source also notes that places like Hong Kong and Macau, being dependencies, are precluded, meaning prevented, from joining the VWP.
so the VWP itself is complex. Now, those territories, Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands, you said they have their own separate waiver program.
They do. It's the Guam CNMI Visa Waiver Program. Different list of eligible countries includes Australia, Japan, South Korea, but also Brunei, Malaysia, Singapore, Nauru, Papua New Guinea, and importantly China, but only for entry into the Northern Mariana Islands, NMI, not Guam.
Interesting. And how long can they stay?
Up to 45 days usually,
Yeah.
but only 14 days for Chinese nationals visiting the NMI. It's for tourism or business.
And do they need an electronic authorization too?
Yes, but it's called the GCNMI ETA. The source says this one currently has no fee, unlike ESTA. It's valid up to 2 years usually, requires a machine-readable passport and a return ticket. Big limitation. You cannot use this to travel onward to the mainland U.S. or other territories.
Okay.
And you have to go through a full immigration inspection if you travel between Guam and the NMI, or when you leave either place.
Immigration inspection, the border check, got it. So that's very island-specific. And American Samoa, still totally separate.
Completely separate. U.S. visas, none of that works for American Samoa.
Yeah.
The source says it has its own entry rules. You generally need an entry permit or an electronic pre-approval called an OK board from their local government.
An entry permit, just their local permission slip to enter.
Pretty much. And even U.S. nationals need specific documents or the electronic authorization. The source says a $50 fee applies there and proof of why they're visiting, though once they're admitted, they can stay indefinitely.
And for other nationalities visiting American Samoa,
they have their own entry permit waiver program for some countries, allowing 30-day visits without a permit. But if arriving by air, they still need that OK board authorization, which costs $40. Nationals of neighboring Samoa have a slightly different, cheaper OK board process, $10 fee, with stricter limits. It just hammers home how unique American Samoa's system is.
Fascinating how these places fit under the U.S. flag and have distinct entry rules. What about the freely associated states? Marshall Islands, Micronesia, Palau.
Right. Under the Compacts of Free Association, citizens of these three nations have special rights. If they were born citizens or naturalized and lived there 5+ years and didn't just buy citizenship, the source says they can enter, live, study, and work in the U.S. indefinitely without a visa.
Wow, indefinitely without a visa. That's significant. Okay, neighbors, Canada and Bermuda.
Canadians and Bermudians are generally visa-free for most temporary visits. Bermuda has a 180-day limit and needs a specific passport notation. The source also mentions the USMCA trade deal. The U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement makes work authorization easier for certain Canadian professionals.
And Mexico, more complex.
Yes. Very few Mexicans are visa-free. Mostly certain officials, specific tribal members, airline crew. Most others use that border crossing card we mentioned, which acts like a visa. And like Canada, USMCA provides pathways for some Mexican professionals to work more easily in the U.S.
Okay. One last really specific group mentioned in the source, American Indians born in Canada.
Yeah, this is based on the very old Jay Treaty from 1794, which is actually codified, written into U.S. law. It allows American Indians born in Canada to enter and live in the U.S. indefinitely for work, study, etc., if they can prove they have at least 50% American Indian blood.
50% ancestry. So just being a member of a tribe isn't enough.
Correct. The source says they need proof of that ancestry percentage. And it doesn't automatically cover their family members. Family has to qualify independently. Though, once residing here under this provision, they are considered permanent residents and can potentially sponsor family, subject to the usual visa limits and backlogs, meaning waiting times.
That Jay Treaty rule is a really unique historical piece of the system. Okay, let's loop back to actually getting a non-immigrant visa and the potential for denial. We talked about overcoming the presumption of immigrant intent. What other factors do officers consider according to the source?
Beyond the binding ties, they look at things like your financial situation. Can you support yourself? Do you have stable employment back home? Do you own material assets like property? And of course, your criminal record. They want to be reasonably sure you'll leave when you're supposed to, and that you actually qualify for this specific visa category.
And if you don't convince them, what's the most common reason for denial?
Section 214B, that's the section of the law covering the failure to prove non-immigrant intent or failure to meet the visa category's specific requirements. The source gives examples. Maybe the officer just isn't convinced a student F1 applicant really plans to return home, or an H-1B applicant doesn't quite prove they have the required degree for that specialty occupation.
So 214B covers both the intent and the specific qualifications. If someone gets hit with a 214B denial, what's the advice from the source? Just give up.
No, the advice is practical. Try to figure out why. Where did you fall short? Was your trip purpose unclear? Were your ties not well documented? Did you miss some requirement for the visa type? Address those specific weaknesses before you reapply.
Reapplying after fixing the problem makes sense. Is there ever a way around a denial, like a waiver? The source mentions something called a HRINCA waiver.
Yes, in rare cases. Section 212D3 allows for a temporary waiver for someone who is technically inadmissible, shouldn't be allowed in. It's sometimes called a HRINCA waiver after a court case.
And how is that decided? It sounds like a high bar.
It is. The decision involves balancing 3 factors, according to the source. The risk of harm to U.S. society if the person enters, the seriousness of their prior violations, how bad were their past immigration or criminal issues, and the reasons why they need to come to the U.S. It's a tough judgment call.
Okay, so waivers exist but are rare exceptions. The source also dives into some stats and specific situations that are pretty revealing.
Yeah, the adjusted visa refusal rates for B visas really paint a picture. Huge differences between countries. You see very high refusal rates, like over 50%, sometimes way higher for places like Afghanistan, Cuba, Laos. Then you see rates often under 3% for many European countries, Australia, Canada. It clearly shows nationality and likely perceived country conditions heavily influence outcomes.
And what about people overstaying their visas?
The source cites Department of Homeland Security data on suspected in-country overstays. Venezuela apparently has the highest number of people estimated to have overstayed, but countries like Myanmar, Bhutan, Turkmenistan have very high rates of overstay relative to how many people arrive from there.
Interesting data. The source also notes situations where the U.S. restricts visas more broadly, like sanctions.
Right. Sanctions are basically penalties. The U.S. can suspend visa issuance for government officials and their families from countries deemed uncooperative in taking back their citizens who are being deported from the U.S. The source listed Cambodia, Eritrea, Laos, Myanmar as examples in 2024. Sanctions can also target individuals involved in human rights abuses or undermining democracy.
And blanket bans, that sounds even broader.
It is. It means suspending or canceling visas for pretty much all citizens of a particular country, usually due to a specific dispute. The source gives an example from April 2025 involving South Sudan visas reportedly canceled because the government refused to accept a deportee from the U.S.
Wow, that's a drastic measure. Something else unexpected mention, remote U.S. outlying islands.
Yeah, places like Midway Atoll, Baker Island, they're mentioned as being severely restricted. You can't just go there. Access requires special permits from agencies like the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service or the Nature Conservancy who manage these protected areas.
Definitely not on the typical tourist map. Now, a really current point from the source. Social media checks.
Yes. As of April 2025, the source states social media activity is officially a factor in visa screening. Specifically, it says the Secretary of State mandated scrutiny ordered a close look at the social media of anyone who has visited the Gaza Strip since 2007, and it connects this policy directly to the visa revocations cancellations of 300 students who had criticized Israel's actions there. So, online activity and political expression are explicitly linked to visa decisions in this context based on the source.
That's a very pointed example from the source showing how current events and online life intersect with visa policy. Lastly, the source gives a couple of really unusual cases.
Right, just to show the complexities. There's the example of a Japanese mafia figure getting visas for a liver transplant, which the source says involved FBI help, apparently hoping for intel. And the very public case of Narendra Modi. Before becoming India's prime minister, he was denied a diplomatic visa and had his existing B visa revoked back in 2005. This was under a unique religious freedom provision of U.S. immigration law. The source says he was the only person ever denied under that specific section.
Wow.
But then, after he became prime minister, the issue was effectively resolved. He visited the White House, spoke to Congress. These cases, as presented in the source, suggest that high-level politics or perceived national interest can sometimes override or heavily influence standard procedures.
Those definitely show the system isn't always just black and white rules. Finally, a quick mention of going digital.
Yeah, the State Department is testing a digital visa authorization, or DVA system. The goal is an electronic visa record, instead of the physical sticker in your passport.
Ah, like an e-visa.
Sort of, but it's different from ESTA. This is for people who still have to go through the full visa application process. They started trialing it, testing it with K1 Fiancé visas in Dublin back in 2023. So it's potentially the future, moving away from paper and stickers.
Interesting. Shows the system is trying to modernize, at least.
Looks that way.
Wow, okay, that was quite the deep dive. We really covered a lot of ground on U.S. visa policy based on our source material.
We sure did. We started with that basic need for a visa from a diplomatic mission, talked about non-immigrant versus immigrant visas, and that really key point. A visa is just preliminary permission to travel and seek admission. The CBP officer at the port of entry makes the final call.
Right. And we unpacked some common non-immigrant types, the B1, B2 visitor visa, the whole presumption of immigrant intent you have to overcome by showing binding ties, and how that quick adjudication process works. Plus, student visas, FM, exchange, J, various worker visas, H, L, O, and the KT and U visas.
And then all the exceptions. The Visa Waiver Program, VWP, with ESTA and its ineligibility rules, the totally separate systems for Guam, CNMI, and especially American Samoa, the special status for freely associated state citizens, and the rules for Canadians, Mexicans, and American Indians born in Canada.
We also hit the qualification factors, the common 214B denial, those rare waivers, the revealing stats on refusal and overstay rates, things like sanctions, blanket bans, those restricted outlying islands, the social media checks, those unusual specific cases, and finally, the digital visa authorization test.
It's definitely a complex landscape. Lots of rules, lots of nuances.
It really is. So for you listening, what's the takeaway? Well, understanding even the basics like visa versus admission, proving temporary intent, knowing the different categories or waiver rules, it's crucial if you or someone you know is planning travel to the U.S. It shows you need to be prepared, have your documents right, and know that entry isn't automatic.
And it makes you think, doesn't it? Especially about that process. The source highlighting the subjective part, overcoming the intent to immigrate idea in maybe 90 seconds, how your country of origin or personal situation seems to matter based on the stats. And it really poses a question, how much of navigating this system is about meeting the objective rules, and how much is about the human interaction, the perception, the profiling in that brief moment with a consular officer? What does it tell us about how these legal systems actually function on a human level?
That's a really great question to ponder. And hey, for all of you using this deep dive to practice your English, great job sticking with us. Listening to detailed discussions like this is fantastic practice. Maybe go back, listen again. Focus on some key terms we explained. Presumption, binding ties, adjudicated, reciprocity, ineligibility, sanctions, revocations. Hear how they're used. Try explaining one yourself.
Yeah, learning vocabulary in context is definitely the way to go.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into U.S. visa policy. We hope breaking it down was useful, both for understanding the topic and for your English practice. If you have thoughts or questions sparked by this, please share them in the comments on our YouTube channel.
We really do read them, and they help us plan future deep dives.
For sure. And if you found this helpful, please subscribe to the Deep Dive channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next session. It's a great way to stay informed and keep improving your American English listening skills. Thanks for tuning in.